there. All right, there we go. One of the big things that we've talked about before is like the ability for you to watch movies and kind of see how there's some historical symbols. There's some big things historically that you can pull out of this. This is going to be only about a 2.5-minute clip. One of my favorite movies as far as, you know, blood, gore, violence, all that stuff that goes on. There's some romance, there's some love, there's some history in it, all that stuff that goes on. But the idea of 300 is one. Again, we're going to watch a short clip. What you're going to want to do from this is pull some of the things that you can learn from things that are said and things that are done behind the scenes, okay? And I want you to kind of make sure that you're paying attention to this and we can see the difference of what it is. All right, so I'm going to roll this clip and then we will see exactly what all we can get in here, okay? So this guy right here, go ahead and give you a little bit of backdrop on it. This guy that's here, he is a Spartan, okay? And this guy right here is, from what you've already learned, is a Persian, okay? But he's just a messenger. He's just a dude that's coming here to talk to the Spartan Leonidas, and he's going to tell him the message that his king gave to him right there. All right, so here we go.
Listen carefully, Leonidas. Xerxes conquers and controls everything he rests his eyes on. He leads an army so massive it shakes the ground with its march, so vast it drinks the rivers dry. All the god King Xerxes requires is this: a simple offering of earth and water, a token of Sparta's submission to the will of Xerxes.
Submission. Well, that's a bit of a problem. See, rumor has it the Athenians have already turned you down.
That guy's an Athenian.
And those philosophers and boy lovers on that camp now.
We must be diplomatic.
And of course, Spartans have the reputation to consider.
Choose your next words carefully, Leonidas. They may be your last as king.
Got a sweet rat tail.
Madman. You're a madman.
Yeah, and water. But you'll find plenty of both down there.
No man, Persian or Greek, no man threatens a messenger.
You bring the crowns and heads of conquered kings to my city steps. You insult my queen. You threaten my people with slavery and death. But I've chosen my words carefully, Persian. Perhaps you should have done the same.
Blasphemy! This is madness!
This is Sparta!
I'm gonna leave the lights off because I'm gonna go back to this right here. But tell me some things that you picked up from the video that are there. What are some things that you could have picked up from this video that were big inferences that you just picked up on your own? Okay, a messenger. Okay, so he had a huge army. All right, so he's threatening the king of Sparta with his army. Okay, everybody else is following, all the other stuff. All right, we'll go to kind of some words that are in here. But he tells them, he says, there you brought the kings and the crowns and the heads of other leaders to my steps to threaten me with this, right? So has the Persian army been successful or have they been defeated a bunch? They've been very successful. All right? They're trying to go in and not even fight these dudes, so they want to enslave them. They want to take their land and enslave them, all right, and bring them as part of the empire to be able to not have to fight. Hey, here's my threat. Just go ahead and hand it over so we don't even have to mess with this. Okay? What else? We're going to get back to the messenger also here in a second. What do you think, Maya? What else did you get in there? There's about 12 things that are really, really big in that clip on 2.5 minutes. Got one.
I mean, personally, I don't know if it's a big deal, but he seems to really like his area that he's in, and he's very defensive over it.
Yeah.
Because of what he did. Like, he insulted his queen.
Call out his manhood, right? Okay? So he called out his manhood, and is that, what do the Spartan dudes look like? Do they have a dad bod, or are they cut up and ripped? They're cut up and ripped. Right? They are trained warriors. Right? They even had a 300 workout from that deal. A lot of that stuff is fake. They're airbrushed on abs, ladies. So just to give you no false image that's on there. All right? So some of those guys had the old airbrush abs, kind of like when somebody wears a T-shirt at the beach with abs painted on there. Now some of those dudes are cut up, but overall they are trained warriors. All right? So you go back from that, and what did those little kids look like?
Sticks.
Okay, so they are getting ready to be turned over, and they're going to be trained as warriors from the point of them being a non-child adolescent to the point where they're going to get trained to be the fierce warrior that they are, right? They're kind of dirty, they're kind of rough, right? Like they're living in the streets and trying to figure out a way to survive. Well, the thing is, they're being trained to be military men from the ages of 5 and on. They're taken away from their mother on, and they're going to be trained to be a military man as a child. That's going to be their job, and they already started when they're a little kid. What else? All right, I'm going to go through a couple with you right here, okay? And I want you to see some big, big differences that are on this film. All right, so starting off wise, we said it was a messenger. What does this messenger look like compared to the king based upon his dress? What's that? Okay, he's got armor on. What color is that armor? Gold. A messenger. Just a plain average messenger is displaying the power of Persia based upon the gold that's around his crown, the gold that's hanging from there, and the cloak that hangs in. All right, you're showing, hey, even our messengers, even one of the smallest of the elite dudes we have, he's decked out in pure gold that's right there, okay? So as it goes through, he talks about his glorious king, Xerxes, how he controls everything.
So massive, it shakes the ground with its march. So vast, it drinks the rivers dry. All the god King Xerxes requires is this, a simple offering of earth and water.
So he builds up that army. It shakes the ground. It drinks the rivers dry. All you have to do is give up your land and your water. So that's a huge, huge deal. That's the Athenian. That's what you're going to talk about today. Is the overall Greeks, all right? The Athenians, the Romans, and the Persians that are there. All right? Does that guy look like the king? Is he as cut up? Is he as manly? Is he everything else? No. Okay. What do they call him later? They call him a thinker and a boy lover. Okay. So they're kind of giving him a distance in there, saying as compared to us, these guys right here, they're not near as manly as we are, and they've already turned you down. They said, no, we're not giving up what we got. So why in the world would these 300 ripped up, cut up men, why are they going to go in? And philosophers and boy lovers, if they've already said no, then why would we not say no? So they're essentially going to go. Another thing is the word diplomatic, okay? That's a big one that we talked about a little bit government-wise, okay? They're going to be able to be diplomatic. They're going to be able to talk about this thing, okay? He tells him there, choose your last words wisely. They may be your last as king, okay? So that's a big decision that he's got. As he goes through his big decision, okay, He's going to look back at somebody before he makes his overall decision. And that is a big, huge key point. He sees the women, the children, he sees everybody else that's around there, and he has to take into contemplation what is best for them. Okay, not just what's best for me. So it's not a dictatorship. And then he looks at his wife. Huge thing here. Okay, he looks at his wife. Yep, she nods her head. Okay, so what does that tell you about women in the Spartan culture? That they're what? That they're highly regarded. Okay, that they can look back onto them and they can give advice. The women in the king queen top role of this right here is very, very huge. It's in there.
Madman. For a madman. Yeah, never was. You'll find plenty of both down there. No man. Personal grief. No man threatens a messenger. You bring the crowns and heads of conquered kings to my city steps. You insult my queen. You threaten my people with slavery and death. Oh, I've chosen my words carefully, Persian. Perhaps you should have done the same.
Sebastian, this is madness.
It's kind of an unwritten rule that if you send a messenger to give the message, that you're not going to kill the messenger, that he's going to be able to go back. You know what I'm saying? So he's really, he's insulted him so much that he's going all the way into it. He kind of rethinks his thought process. This is when he turns to his wife, and his wife gives him the nod of like, go ahead. All right, we're going to war. We're going to get into this. Again, it's a huge deal because his wife is giving him the okay, the acknowledgement of. And then the last part is, who leads the charge of it? The king or his soldiers? The king does. He's right there in the mix of it. He's fighting with everybody. He's the leader that is not afraid to go. Whereas compared to, you're going to see King Xerxes later on, that's going to sit there and be behind all of these gigantic elephants and madmen that come out with exploding bombs and rhinos and all this other cool stuff that's in there. So this is a big, big difference between how the civilizations were in that. All right.
All right. So you guys got a little bit of like, this is kind of like, this is one of the battles we're going to talk about. We're going to, or not battles, but wars we're going to talk about in our lesson today. If you guys could go to your modules and do another little quiz for me, I'd appreciate it. Go ahead and get that done. You have a few minutes on this. We are not going to finish this today, most likely, and so we'll finish this on Friday for most of the rest of this this lesson at least. Tomorrow we'll do government, and then I'll continue this on. So it's going to be in the same place. It's just going to be the pre-quiz 9/23/2020. Nice. Get them all right.
I mean, I got one right.
You only got one right. Thought you were like this. Thought you said you were like the smartest one in the class last class.
I'm having an off day today.
You having an off day today? Oh, okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. All right. Am I taking it so far? Good. All right. So today we're talking about Greek and Roman empires, the conflicts that they were involved in, the different battles, different skirmishes, stuff like that. We're gonna go over that today. This one's gonna be different than my last PowerPoint because last time apparently the audio didn't work, so I had to put more information on this one for y'all. You can still take notes of the things I say, but there's gonna be a lot of stuff on here also. So the rivalries that we're talking about today is going to be the Greeks and the Persians for the Persian Wars, the Greeks versus the Greeks for the Peloponnesian Wars, Greeks versus Macedon, which is just another Greek, but this is going to be Alexander the Great. So the Macedonians versus Persia, Rome versus the Etruscans and the Greeks, Rome versus Carthage, and Rome versus Huns and Germanic tribes, right? So it's kind of broken down into different groups based on who they fought and who was fighting, right? So we have the Spartans. You just saw a little video about the Spartans, a little bit of pretext to what their type of society is built on, right? So Sparta becomes a dominant military force when they first invade Messenia, which was another little Greek city-state or Greek town by them. What they would do to these Messenians is they would slave them. They'd make them into what we call helots, which would be one of the lower class of their class structure, and they would use them as like a peasant workforce. All right. Basically, what happened, why Sparta got such a strong military, is they had to constantly keep these helots in check from riots, uprisings, and trying to break the enslavement. And so it really elevated them into a military power because they were constantly in the struggle to fight against their own workforce. All right. So Spartan daily lives, they value duty, strength, individuality, and discipline over freedom. So their whole idea was you fought, and it was more important than anything else. All right. They had the most powerful army in Greece. They were only second by the Athenians. And when it came to, if you looked in your question, when I asked you about did they have the strongest navy, it's actually Athens that had the strongest navy at this time. So males were moved into the barracks. So they once you turned 7 years old as a child, you got thrown into the barracks and you started your combat training. So imagine if you have a little brother, them being taken away at such a young age and just taken to go fight. Then also, when you were born, they would check to make sure you weren't sickly or you were up to a standard. If not, they would throw you off a cliff. Yeah. You see that, that little pit they were that you saw them kick him into? Well, that's what that is. It's this little pit that they would throw infants into if they weren't up to the standards of the Spartans.
Now, why would they do that?
Because they want them to be strongest.
They want to be the strongest, and also they can't have a mother that dedicates her whole life to taking care of somebody that's not adequate to their standards. You know what I mean? So, like where we have it now, we continue to go on, everything's normal. They can't use their time raising a child only. They have to take care of the whole rather than single.
So,
Because the kid was like autistic or like.
yeah, just any type of like syndromes, like stuff like that, they would just throw them into a pit. If you were just sick, they would just throw you into the pit.
Even if you're like older and you were sick, they throw you.
No, I mean it was usually they'd probably put you into like slavery or to working force, but as a baby, if they deemed you not fit, they'd throw you into a pit. Some of these children that were about the age of 7 to about 12, they'd actually be thrown into the wilderness to survive on their own, but basically just underwear on, and they were told to survive.
No.
That'd be fun. I don't know about that. It's cold up in the mountains. But also, like we were talking about, girls received military training because it was thought if the Spartan female would raise good Spartan warriors, and so they actually also would get military training, and they also lived pretty hard lives also. And they were the ones that were taught this value of service in Sparta is above all else. So this idea come along. So this is what kind of elevated Sparta into this massive military force, right? So the Persian War, and we have Darius. So this is the first Persian War. There's like two sets of Persian Wars. There's the Darius version of Persian War, and then there's the Xerxes version of Persian War, right? So a new kind of armory emerged, right? We have this this new technology that was used, iron, like we talked about a few classes ago. Iron became a big thing because it was cheap to manufacture iron tools, cheap to manufacture iron weaponry and armor. And so it was also stronger than bronze, so it kind of gave it an advantage to the Greeks. If you look at the Persians down here, this little picture, it looks like a little cowhide, right? And then right here you have an iron shield. Do you think a cowhide's going to really block anything? It's not going to do a great job against a giant sword swinging straight through it. It's not very going to work out. So this new army started being created. It's called the Phalanx. It's a new system of where they would use spears and shields to protect against attacks. It was a defensive strategy and also an offensive strategy at the same time. This would eventually lead into what we see the Roman legions. It'd be kind of the same concept. They created this idea of turtling. It's called the turtle or tank formations that were created from this type of fighting. All right, and so during this time we get one of the most famous battles in ancient history, the Battle of Marathon. Anybody know anything about the Battle of Marathon? What is that?
The miracle?
Huh?
Is that the one where the dude? Wait.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, say it.
Yeah, say it.
Like ran.
Oh yeah, that's him. So this is where we get the very first marathon. This idea of the marathon. So so this is a Greek victory. The battle was a victory, but so what happened is the Persians split off their forces. They sent some of the forces to Athens to invade the main city of Athens. And so after this battle that the Greeks won at the Battle of Marathon, the soldiers themselves marched 26 miles nonstop to go fight the invading Persian army. But they sent Philippides to race to Athens to warn them ahead of time. And the legend says that he ran 26 miles in his armor, this heavy armor, and then he passed out dead right as he got there. So this is where we get the modern day marathon from. This idea of the 26 mile that's where the marathon, because the Battle of Marathon to Athens is 26 miles. Yes. All right, so now we get into another famous battles. But so this is Persian War part 2. So we get Xerxes. Xerxes is when in the video when he was talking about Xerxes lays his eyes upon everything, he conquers it. So it was really his dad, but regardless. So this is where we get the Battle of the 300. Anybody remember the Battle of the 300? You know, we just watched the movie. So the Battle of the 300 was 300 Spartans and about 700 Thespians, which is another Greek city-state, and there's also other Greeks that would actually show up with the Spartans. It's a misconception that the Spartans were the only ones fighting. They actually fought alongside of probably, they estimate about 3,000 other Greeks. But the Spartans made up the main brunt of the fighting force. This was all versus about 100,000 to 200,000 Persian military forces. And they would hold out for 3 days until the Persian king would get word of a goat pass in the mountains to get around the Spartan wall of death, basically what it was. This battle is also called the Battle of Thermopylae, is also what it's named. So we get this. This is a very, if you've ever watched this movie, this part of him throwing his spear is in it. So that was another, that kind of floored the, it made it slowed down Xerxes' advance onto the mainland, into mainland Greece. Another battle that's very famous was the Battle of Salamis, which took about 307 Greek triremes versus about 800 Persian galleys. This is, as you can see, the Greeks were always undermanned compared to the Persians. They were outnumbered, sometimes 2 to 1, or in this case, a lot to 1 for the 300. So these battles, though, ended in a win for the Greeks. This battle right here ended installed the Persian invasion, and it pretty much just ended Xerxes' time on the Greek mainland, which ended in a victory for the Greek city-states. So this would be a blemish on Xerxes' reputation as a fighter, and so yeah. Forgot to mention this, but the thing that kind of knocked this war on was a rebellion in the Ionian Peninsula, or the Ionian Greeks. You know, we talked about that Turkey, Anatolia. There's a place called Ionia, and that's where these Greeks would rebel. And so the Spartans and the Athenians kind of sent some troops over to help out. And so that's why we get the Persian War, right? So that's a little brief synopsis of it. That's not the whole story. There's a lot more battles, but these are the two important ones in the scheme of it. So the Peloponnesian War. So the Peloponnesian War was a war between Sparta and Athens. So you can already see from that video that you just watched that the Spartans already didn't like Athens in any way. They thought they were the worst people ever. But the reason for the start of the Peloponnesian Wars is that the Athenians started to create an empire. They created something called the Dorian League, which is like was a organization that was meant to be like a treaty of a bunch of different Greek city-states that would work together. What ended up happening is Athenians started to strong arm most of the other Greek city-states and required them to give them money or taxes, a source of taxes. So this would start the Peloponnesian Wars because the Spartans thought, well, the Athenians were getting too strong. And then they created their own league. And then these two leagues started to fight off against each other. And that's where we get the Peloponnesian Wars. So we have Greeks fighting Greeks now. So we had, at first it was Greeks fighting Persians. Through all this power and all this this newfound military might, the Athenians and the Spartans started to fight each other because they thought that either one of them could thwart the other one. So the Peloponnesian Wars started about in 431 BCE. City-state of Sparta and Athens started warring with each other. So Sparta, as we know, has the better army, but the Athenians have the better navy. And so what the Athenians would do to kind of keep the fighting away from the land is they would blockade a lot of the ports and trading systems that is so vital to most of the Greek mainland. So they would cut off the trade from Sparta. So they couldn't get grain shipments. They couldn't get military men. They couldn't get aid. But at the same time, the Spartans were going through and burning the farmable land around Athens. So the thing about Athens is they had this city, basically like this. So you have like Athens right here. Here's the coastline. There's sea right here. I'm horrible at drawing. So they had this giant wall that was made, and they made a causeway all the way to a trading port all the way down here. And so there was just this huge wall that went from the Athenian city all the way down into a trading port down here. And so what happened is while they were destroying the farmland around it, the Athenians brought everybody from the surrounding areas into the city walls for protection. And they would get shipments of grain and different supplies through that port city that was protected by all those walls, right? What ended up happening is that the one thing that they were using to fight off the Spartans, this protective wall, actually ended up killing them. A plague brought from Egypt, is what the predictions are, came and wiped out most of the Athenian population, and then including Pericles, which is the main Greek king for the Athenians. And so the one thing that was keeping them in the fight actually ended up killing them. And it actually ended up saving the Spartans because they didn't get any of that tainted grain from the Egyptians. So eventually, this led to the first truce of many truces in the Peloponnesian Wars in 421 BC. But then the second part of it, the Athenians decided they wanted to try to attack an island called Syracuse. There's a Greek city-state there that was very influential, had a lot of trade, a lot of wealth, and they wanted to take control of that. They actually ended up losing that battle, and then ended up fighting with Sparta, and then eventually they would lose the Peloponnesian Wars. And then the Athenians would never actually be the same after that. They would never be up to the military might or power after the Peloponnesian Wars. So during all this chaos and turmoil and all this fighting, a new group would arise in Greece, and this would be called the Macedonians. So this is Alexander the Great and Philip II. These two guys were the start of the Macedonian Empire. So King Philip II was a ruler and a brilliant general. He always wanted to control Greece. One thing is the Greeks didn't consider the Macedonians Greek. They thought they were just barbarians. They showed them when Macedonia would go and destroy most of Greece and then go on to eventually take over the known world. But we'll get to that. So Philip created this well-trained professional army and had these invasion plans of Greece, right? So eventually, in 338 BC, the Macedonians defeated the Greeks and controlled most of the area. But unfortunately, King Philip II would die by a murder of, I believe, his advisors. But his son, the king, would become the king of Macedonia, named Alexander the Great. And some of you that have done your project on Alexander the Great know that he would go into, he'd do great things, all right? So Alexander the Great's early life, to get a little background on him, he had a lot of military training growing up, even from the start. Like his dad got him the best teachers, the best people ever. Aristotle was actually one of his teachers, one of the great thinkers of his time, Athenian thinkers. So he got one of the best. He was a well-rounded individual. He wasn't just a dumb brute. He was very intelligent. But yeah, he became king at 20 years old, so younger than I am now. Became king. Huh? I'm sorry? Just somebody said something. Sorry.
Yeah, they said, oh my God.
Oh, okay.
Man, 20-year-old king.
Yeah. So yeah, 20 years old. And then to kind of show his might, they didn't think that he was going to mean anything to as a king. They thought he was going to falter and he was weak. He wouldn't stop the first rebellion that he saw, which was in Thebes. So he curbed this rebellion and it gave him solidity to his empire, right? So Alexander the Great, conquest of Persia. So his invasion of Persia. There's a lot of things, they were kind of mad. The Greeks were had a lot of discontent, a thorn under their saddle for the Persians. They hated them. So he was like, I'm just going to go ahead and just conquer, go attack the Persians. So in 334 BC, Alexander invaded Persia. And he had a few quick victories because the Persian armies couldn't keep up with the new fighting force of Alexander the Great. He was a great general, very tactical general, and he would go and just defeat different forces one by one by one. He would eventually kill the Persian king in, I believe, where was it at? In Babylon. And so Alexander would march into Egypt and be crowned pharaoh. So again, when we talked about this yesterday with the Hellenistic culture, so he had started to adopt some of this culture. So he had dropped Egyptian culture because he was even crowned the pharaoh. So he is now a god king in the eyes of the Egyptians. All right. He would eventually also take a Persian wife. He would get a Persian wife to solidify his reign in the Persian region. All right. So Alexander captures the city of Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis. That's how you said. That's the Persian capital, and he burns it to the ground. He's like, joke's on y'all, and just burn the whole thing to the ground. So this is where you would see the total destruction of the Persian Empire, all right? He'd make his empire all the way into India. Alexander would fight his way across the Central Asia into India. Everywhere he went, he just would slaughter everything. He would kill everything, slaughter everything. But eventually he would make it to the Indus River Valley, like we talked about, in about 326 BC. And then he would return to Babylon with his wife, and he would die there. He got sick. And so he would die there. And so his legacy, there's a lot of thought that he would have probably went through India and then maybe into modern-day China. There was a lot of speculation that he could have done that. So one of his legacies, the thing he's left behind, was that Alexander melded Greek and Persian culture. His wife is Persian. The empire becomes 3 kingdoms after this point. So they fell apart because his leadership kept it there. And so his generals would break up into different kingdoms. It wasn't just 3, but these are the main 3. So you have the Macedonian kingdom, which would be most Greek in the city-states. You have Egypt, and you have Old Persia, which is the Seleucid Empire. So this would be his legacy that he would leave behind, is the Hellenistic culture, and then this these multiple kingdoms. So during this time, after this falling apart of the Greeks and the Persian empires, we have a new empire emerging at this time. We have the Romans. They started around 600 BC. They were ruled by an Etruscan kings. So these kings would build the first temples and like public centers we think of. And so eventually, after this point, about 500 BC, the Romans finally overthrow the Etruscans, which would have been the oppressors for so many years. We talked about last class, how they thought they were tyrants ruling over them. They would also overthrow the Greeks in the south. And then they would found a republic, which we're going to talk about tomorrow, what a republic is, and how the Roman Republic looks like, how our republic now looks today. All right. And so I talked about the Roman legions. So the Roman army, this legions is a military unit with about 500 people, and then you'd have supporting cavalry. So you'd have these long lines. They look like squares if you've ever seen things for the Roman legions, and then they're supported by usually a cavalry unit or some type of support unit. Right. So this army is so powerful, and it leads to being the key to the rise of Rome and the Roman Empire eventually. I capitalized the H. That looks like crap. All right. So one of the first big challengers to Rome would be Carthage. And you remember how I talked about how mountains are usually hard to cross. They're usually one of those natural barriers. The guy named Hannibal didn't think so. So I'll talk about it in a second. So the Roman Carthage began the Punic War. This is 3 different wars, but it's considered one. Different things. So Rome defeated Carthage and won Sicily eventually. So Sicily's this little island right here. That's Sicily. And so that's, as you see, that's right off the Roman coast. And then Carthage is right here. A lot of these battles were also naval battles. They don't talk about it a lot in your Teaks and all stuff like that. But it's interesting the way the Romans were really not good at naval warfare. So what they would do is they would ram a ship. They'd put these like things that would fall onto the ship to lock the ship in, and they'd actually like rush hoplites and legions onto the boats, so they could actually fight the way they're good at instead of actually fighting like naval battles. So it's actually very interesting. They weren't the greatest when it came to actual Navy combat. Hannibal, which is a great Carthaginian general, would actually come and almost get very close to destroying the Romans as we know it. He would do the impossible, well, what was thought impossible, and actually cross over the Italian Alps into Rome and invade Rome, something that had never been thought could happen because this natural barrier is so hard to pass. But no, he brought elephants, donkeys, everything over these passes to attack. Imagine trying to get a bunch of elephants up a mountain. That's not very easy, right? Exactly. That's what I would think. No, but he did it. No, that's one of the things he did it. And so eventually they would win. They'd beat Carthage. They would take control of all of Italy again. They'd take control of Spain, what we know as modern day Spain and France, and also part of North Africa. What they would do to this Carthage is they salted the ground in which they would farm on. What do you think is significant about salting the ground of farmers? I'm sorry? Part of it. What else? What do you think salt does to plants? Yeah, it kills plants. If you salt the soil of your enemies, you're actually destroying their ability to grow crops, and it destroys their ability to feed their people. And so they would starve out part of Carthage eventually and force them to surrender. All right? Yeah. Just start sprinkling it everywhere. So after the Punic War, we see the Roman Empire. It wasn't the Roman, it was still the Roman Republic, but they'd start taking control of these vast regions that we talked about on Monday. So we had the rise of the Roman Empire. Did you guys ever read about Julius Caesar? Yet, or is that maybe I think that's next year? You guys might, if I remember. You guys know anything about Julius Caesar? He got the little stab. He got stabbed a few times. He's not here about that. He got the stab a few times. Okay. So Julius Caesar decided he wanted to become a dictator of this of the republic in this and so he did. So he's a military leader. He was elected consul, which a consul is like we consider that like the president. There's like 2 consuls usually, and so he was one of them, and he was considered like the president at the time. So there was he becomes a group of 3 rulers: Caesar, Cassius, and Pompey. The trivad is a trivad, and so this is 3 rulers. They all control. Actually, Cassius is one of the richest men of Rome at the time. A lot of money. Guys has a ton of money. All right. So his military victory leads to him to getting a lot of power and a lot of popularity. Right. And so his Pompey fears that his growing power is going to lead to a dictatorship. And so he kind of creates a civil war. So this is where we get an actual civil war between Caesar and Pompey, where they actually fight each other in Asia, Spain, and Egypt. There's a time where Caesar was actually spinning in Egypt with the Egyptian queen at the time. Oh yeah. So he was named dictator for life. So he got power for life in 444 BC. But there was as you can see, an assassination attempt on his life, and he got stabbed a few times. And just say he did not make that. And then he got stabbed a few times. Look, see the little knives?
By the friends that he trusted.
Yeah, those are all his friends. Those were supposed to be his buddies. They'd be like all your whole friend group stabbing you multiple times. They just kept going at it. Each of them just took turns stabbing this guy. Like that's.
Why though?
That's kind of where the phrase "stab somebody in the back." That's kind of where that phrase comes from.
Yeah, this is literally what's getting stabbed in the back. They thought he had too much power, and he was getting way too much power. And they got jealous. Yeah, it's jealousy. That's what it is. And they thought he was gonna destroy the Roman Republic, which he did. I mean, in all fairness, he did destroy the Roman Republic. Yeah. Maybe. I mean, you're supposed to trust your friends, so it's like just like your group of friends just start stabbing you because they're jealous of you. So eventually, we'd have this. How much time do we have? Okay, well that's all the time we have today. So we'll finish this later. There's like one more slide, but we'll finish it Friday, and all right. Well, thank y'all.
You even gave me snail.